Wealth is a mindset. If it was easy, everyone would be a billionaire. They aren't. In this house, we do the work and are wildly resourced as a result. Welcome to House of Wealth. It's time to actualize your destiny.
I'm gonna live in freedom, freedom. I'm gonna live my destiny. I'm gonna live my freedom, freedom. I'm gonna live, the time is right now.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of House of Wealth. So this week marked 11 months for me of being alcohol-free and being carnivore. And it's Saturday in Bali right now. And I have had a whole week of reflection on this last 11 months. I was a little bit blown away when I feel like every month I have to actually add up how long it's been, which is funny. You would think that I would remember, but I don't. And I think that's honestly because I'm not in a place where I crave alcohol or where I'm wanting to eat other foods. I feel so good physically, mentally, emotionally that I don't spend a lot of time focused on the reality of being alcohol free or I don't feel like I'm being deprived in my carnivore diet. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, if that makes sense. But when the time came around this week, it actually put me into a place of deep reflection about the last 11 months. And a couple of things happened this week that, one, I recognized and realized how differently I was responding to them. But also, I realized how powerful time is in healing really all things. So, if you've been following my story and you've been following my life over the last 11 months, you know that 2022 and 2023 were a massive time of deconstruction for me of every single area of my life, like everything deconstructed. And from August 14th, which was the first day that I had no alcohol, to now, the last 11 months have been a rebuilding and the calling home to God that I've been speaking about on the podcast, a real deep dive into discovery of actually who I am and what my values are and what my morals are and how I want to live my life and the type of person that I want to be. And I will just say that the early months of the reconstruction after the deconstruction were really painful. I had a lot of regret. I had a lot of grief. There was a lot of reflection that I did where I was beating myself up over the things that I did that I wasn't proud of, or the situations that I allowed myself to be a part of that I wasn't proud of, or the way that I had neglected the parenting of my children that I wasn't proud of. And having to take responsibility and accountability for your part in things is not often a pleasant experience. So I spent a few months, I would say 2 to 3 months doing a lot of journaling, doing a lot of self-reflection, and really taking ownership of the things that I wasn't proud of. I tried to be objective in that as I could, because I also recognized and realized that beating myself up wasn't going to solve anything. It was more important for me to evaluate the data and try to identify where I became lost. And from that, try to figure out how not to go back to that place, if that makes sense. The biggest thing for me, I think, was that I got caught in the pursuit of financial freedom. I'll just say that. I think that's a good, like, all-encompassing term, financial freedom, because that seems to be what everyone is chasing. And the reality of that chase for financial freedom actually ended up with me building myself a prison where I was, even though I was trading time for a lot of money, I was still trading time for money. I was incredibly unhappy. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders because I had created a lifestyle that required a lot of me to maintain it. I was responsible for a lot of people, a lot of people's lives, a lot of people's families. I had to keep creating and churning out programs and content to maintain the life that I had created. My health was failing, as you guys know. I didn't really have the energy to continue on the way I was continuing on. So I was being fueled by adrenaline, and adrenaline that was coming from a really unhealthy place. But I was continually seeking that idea of financial freedom, that I wanted to make enough money that I finally felt free. And originally it was, when I make 10K a month, I'll feel free. And I didn't. When I make 20K a month, I'll feel free. And I didn't. When I make 50K a month, I'll finally feel free. And I didn't. When I make 100,000 a month, I'll finally feel free. And I didn't. And then I started being like, okay, maybe it's that I need a set amount of money of monthly recurring revenue so that I'm not having to create everything from scratch every month. And so I tried it that way. It was like, if I've got 22,000 in monthly recurring revenue that covers my overhead, I'll finally feel free. So I would achieve that and I wouldn't feel free. Then it was like, okay, I need 50,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And then I'll finally feel like I'm okay. I'll feel free. And I didn't, right? So I kept creating these financial goals for myself, and I was doing all the things to manifest and create my reality. I'm going to do a future episode about manifestation and creation, and activating the fourth dimension in manifestation and creation, and how, when we're doing that from a new age spirituality perspective, we're paying the ultimate price versus doing that in co-creation with God. So that's something I'm going to be sharing in a future episode. But the more money I created, the less I felt that I had achieved, the more hollow I actually felt inside, the more responsibility and overwhelm I felt. And it didn't make sense. And so I just got caught in that cycle of thinking, I just have to create more money. I have to create more money. I have to, put out more programs. I have to charge more for my sessions. And it was such flawed thinking, but I couldn't see outside of this life that I had created for myself and this reality that I had created for myself. And I was believing all of the new age spirituality concepts and the law of attraction concepts and the secret. And if you desire it, you can create it, and it's your will that creates it. And, all of this stuff that now I know to be so incredibly detrimental. And I know that that's not the way that we're meant to do it, but I couldn't fill the hole. And in trying to fill the hole, I fell away from who I was. I fell away from my morals. I fell away from my values. I distanced myself from my children. I was allowing my children to be raised by nannies. And yeah, they were living an amazing, beautiful life on the ocean, but their mother wasn't present. And, prior to COVID, they were going on all these amazing trips, but I was even working on the trips. So I just was very absent for about 6 years. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to come to terms with, was how much I felt I had abandoned my children. There were a lot of tears. There were a lot of tears that were shed over that. There was a lot of feeling of heartbreak and disappointment in myself, and a lot of not really good feelings about who I had become from that perspective. And I still am struggling with that. I am doing my very, very best to make up for that every single day. I'm doing my very best to be present. I'm doing, maybe I'm not doing my very best. Maybe I shouldn't even say that. I am aware and I am working towards being better at that, I think is a better way to say that. I have to always call myself on my bullshit when I say I'm doing my best, because that is something that is like this automatic thing that I say. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. And almost every time I say I'm doing my best, I'm not. Because I also think that there's always room for improvement. No matter what, there's always room for improvement. And that I'm doing my best is such a cop-out. So I'm totally going to call myself on that. So in that evaluation of, and I think really like to share on the no alcohol side of things, the only reason I was able to do that evaluation and to be that honest with myself was because I was no longer numbing in any way, shape, or form with alcohol. And I had no idea how much even one drink impacted me from an emotional perspective. So, and that was actually something in the first 3 months that was quite shocking to me, because I started to feel and I didn't realize that I hadn't been feeling. So as the feelings of regret started coming up, as the feelings of loneliness, because I definitely was feeling a lot of loneliness because I'd isolated myself in Portugal, as the feelings of loneliness, as the feelings of regret, as the feelings of not being a good parent, all of that stuff started coming up. I wasn't going to a glass of wine to numb that. I was literally sitting in it, feeling it, and experiencing it. And that was uncomfortable. But in that discomfort, I recognized that using alcohol as that numbing mechanism was one of the things that had prevented me from actually stopping this snowball effect from happening. Like if I hadn't been numbing, I may have recognized or realized that I was just trying to fill this hole, that the actions and activities that I was doing weren't actually serving me, that I wasn't happy, but I wasn't getting that because I was going through life numb. And, over the years, I had periods of time where I was drinking heavily, and I had periods of time where I wasn't drinking heavily, but I was having like a glass of wine a night, or at least multiple times a week having a glass of wine. And so the alcohol leaving my system and starting to feel again and feel the discomfort of that and being like, okay, I just get to sit in this right now and feel it and experience it. First of all, let me just tell you, like, that is not for the weak. The feeling the feels and at the same time of being in a, data collecting mission and trying to like reconstruct your whole entire life that just fell apart. Not for the weak, not comfortable. I'm so grateful for it, by the way, because, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for everything that happened because all of it led me to where I am right now. But it was not, the first 90 days it was a bit of a shit show, y'all. I'm not going to lie. Like, there were a lot of tears shed. I cried more in that first 90 days than I think I've cried in my whole entire life. And I just felt so alone. I felt so alone. And I realized that I created it. Like, I created the loneliness. I isolated myself. I pulled myself away from the people in my life that mattered to me. And so, yeah, it was just a lot of like deciding that I was going to do better. But the beautiful thing about it is God had finally intervened and I had experienced complete and total annihilation in my life. And I was in a place where I was willing to surrender everything. And probably for the first time in my life, I was in a place where I was willing to surrender everything. And I think I've shared this in one of the last episodes of the podcast, but there was literally a day where I fell down on my knees, bawling begging God to show me the path forward, because I knew that I could not any longer steer the ship. I knew that all of my plans had failed me. I knew that like every direction that I was trying to take myself wasn't working. And it was the most humbling moment of my life. I had mapped out everything that was happening in my business and everything that I was planning on doing in the next 12 months. And I just looked at it all laying on the floor. I'd written it on these big, huge pieces of white paper. And I was in an Airbnb in Porto, in Portugal. And I looked at it and I just started bawling. And I was like, God, I will surrender every single bit of this if that's what you ask of me. And I also remember being so sad to do this, but I was like, and if I'm not supposed to be with my children, if I'm meant to surrender my children, I will do that too. If it's in their highest and best good and it's in my highest and best good, I will surrender even my children. And everything changed from that moment. You know, I surrendered my children, not wanting to surrender my children, but I recognized and realized that like my view and my way of doing things was so broken that I couldn't trust myself anymore to make the right decisions, because the decisions that I had made had become so corrupted. The people that I was surrounding myself with were people that did not have my highest and best interest at heart, were people that were on the same path that I had been on, right? In this continual chase for money, in this continual chase for things, in this continual chase for possessions. And we were all just trying to fill these very, very empty holes. And it was so obvious to me, you know, as I was in these moments. And so everything changed. And I just wanted to feel happy. And I just wanted to feel like I was a good person. And I think one of the things that I realized is, you know, I never set out to hurt anyone ever. And I never, you know, even in hindsight, after all the evaluation of everything that happened, I can say that, you know, certainly actions that I took and things that I went along with hurt other people. And I'm incredibly regretful and incredibly sorry about that. There was never a time when I intentionally did something to hurt someone, or when I intentionally did something that I knew was going to hurt somebody. That never happened in any of my business dealings and any of my, you know, interactions that happened as my business was falling apart and as I didn't have money to pay my bills. And as I was struggling financially, like there was never an intention to be malicious or to hurt anyone like that. I know that to be true. But sometimes through omission, we hurt people. Often through omission, we hurt people. There was a lot of information that I was privy to that was being shared with me and told to me that were secrets that I was keeping that ended up hurting people. And even though I didn't initiate them and I didn't instigate them, I kept the secrets. I held the secrets. And people were hurt as a result. And that makes me really, really sad. And it's not the type of person that I want to be. And so, you know, that was all of the stuff that came crashing down around me and the awarenesses I started having. Again, I think because I was finally clear of mind and I was clear of spirit. And that's something actually that I do want to talk about here. And I'm going to be going into this more, as I said, in future podcasts. But one of the things that I've had such a huge realization of over the last 2 months specifically is that as human beings, like we are vessels of spirit. We were designed and created by God to be vessels of spirit. And some of us have more proclivity to be in contact with, to house spirit. And I think we look at those often as like spiritual gifts, right? People that have spiritual gifts. I have had these experiences with spirit since I was a little girl. My mom used to tell stories about being out with me when I was 2 years old. And we would be out shopping, and I would look at her and I would say, Grandma's calling. And she would say, oh, you mean you want to call Grandma when we get home? And I'd say, no, Grandma's calling. And then we would get home and my grandma would call back, because obviously we didn't have mobile phones then and we didn't have answering machines then, but my grandmother would call and she would say, oh, I called you at 1:30 and you weren't home. And that was the time that I was telling my mom, Grandma's calling. So my mom, has told these stories about me my whole entire life. So I have always had, some people, I guess, would call it a gift of prophecy. But it's a knowing, when people are speaking about the clairs, it's claircognizance, clear knowing. But that's all, I believe, that piece of us being a vessel for spirit, and spirit being able to communicate, connect to us and communicate through us. What I know is that I enabled myself to become a vessel for spirit that was not the type of spirit that I want to be a vessel for. And I am gonna speak more to this, but in future podcast episodes, there's one in particular that I'm really excited to share and drop, but I need to do a little more research and I need to get my hands around a little bit more about what I feel like is happening in the supernatural world before I can share more on that. But the numbing myself with alcohol, it was not only numbing my mental capacity, and not from a being smart or being able to figure things out or logic or reason, but more from a mental and emotional connection, and dulling that warning sign in me that was like, hey, you don't want to be doing this. Hey, this isn't right. Hey, this doesn't feel good in your body. Hey, maybe you shouldn't be hanging out with this person. Hey, this person's lying to people. Maybe you shouldn't be spending so much time with them. Like that, those warning signs that alcohol was numbing and dulling that. The accountability, right? But also the spirit. And there's a reason why alcohol is called spirits. It's because first and foremost, it is a vehicle through which spirit can access and enter your body. And it is not the Holy Spirit, and it is not spiritual beings that are, that have your highest and best interest at heart. Okay. And so I really believe that I opened myself up to the influence of spirit that didn't have my highest and best interest at heart, and didn't have the highest and best interest of the people around me at heart either. I have seen through the alcoholism that has run rampant in my family just how much people can change under the influence of alcohol. I have chosen my whole entire life to be in relationship with men who are heavy drinkers, who are highly influenced by spirit, and are maybe highly influenced isn't the right, are also have a proclivity to being vessel for spirit, both positive and negative, and that the spirit of alcohol is very prominent in their lives, and what's able to actually attach to them and come through them when they're drinking. That has just been something that's a pattern that has been a reality of my life since the first person I ever dated. And so that was able to start to become really clear to me. I was like, wow, like this spirit of alcohol is so powerful. One of the other things that I've really become aware of is how a spirit can lead to, what we would call a generational curse. So I have long history and lines of alcoholism on both sides of my family, my mom's side and my dad's side. And you can see how whatever this spirit is that has anchored into my family lines around alcohol, it creates this pattern of destruction that comes down through the family. And it's so interesting because without even knowing that that's what I was doing, when I begged God to show me the way and to create a path for me, the next day I heard so clearly, you have to stop drinking. And in that moment, I agreed. I agreed with God to stop drinking, and I broke the agreement with that spirit or spirits. I think it was probably multiple because it was coming from both lines of my family. I broke that agreement with that spirit of alcohol that had been in my families for generations. And I think, because people have been like, oh, have you wanted to drink? Have you? And I'm like, I don't even have the desire. Like, it's not even in me. I just have this knowing that my life and my soul is so much better off without it. Now, and I have said, and I will continue to say, like, I'm not going to say that I will never drink again, but I can tell you right now that my life is so radically and dramatically improved that I can't see myself going back to it. People around me are like, you are so changed. You are so happy. You are glowing. Like, you're happy. It's so, like, literally people in my life are like, it's so crazy to see you happy all the time. And I'm like, that's so sad. Like, that I was so unhappy that people were just used to me being unhappy. How sad is that? And so breaking, like, I know that I broke an agreement and I can feel it. I can feel that the agreement was broken. That has created true freedom for me. The breaking of the agreement with the spirit of alcohol, whatever spirit was attached in through the alcohol generationally, has given me freedom. And I feel more contentment and more happiness and more freedom than I've ever felt. And I don't feel hollow. I'm not trying to fill something. That is true freedom. And then I get all the added benefits of, I get to see clearly. I get to live clearly. I get to choose to come into partnership and collaboration with the Holy Spirit instead of all these other spirits that are having their way with me, right? So that's been a really incredible and beautiful part of my journey. And I'm sitting in a place of real evaluation of knowing that I was born with these spiritual gifts, knowing that, I have gifts and I'm not special because of that. Every single person listening to this podcast has a gift or has multiple gifts. What I realize and recognize is that I was incredibly blessed with the gifts of spirit that I was given. And I've used them the wrong way. And I really want to use them the right way now. I really want to just have a heart of service and help people in whatever way I can. And I've been putting myself in more and more situations where I'm able to do that, or I'm able to actually just be of service. And even to be of service in places where there's not a financial exchange, right? I'm being of service. I'm sharing my gifts and I'm not getting paid monetarily for that. And that feels really good because there was so much of me exchanging those spiritual gifts for money. And that's not to say that I don't think people shouldn't be paid for sharing their gifts in the world. I'm not saying that at all. And in fact, I think that's one of the biggest fallacies of spirituality and money. While I've stepped away from wealth consciousness work and money work over the last couple of years, I can feel that starting to come back around. I can feel that I really want to share more on, how to use those types of gifts in the right way, that I want to share on, there are ways to be financially compensated by sharing your gifts in the world. And there are ways to do that are in alignment with God and with the highest expression of who you came here to be. I want to talk about the issues that I see with New Age manifestation, and the ultimate price that I think people are paying that they're not even aware of for engaging in that type of work. And so all of that is coming down the track. So bear with me, but there will definitely be future episodes about that, and I'll be sharing more about that. But for me, I've been revisiting all of this the last week, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, because it was like, oh, how has not having the alcohol impacted me? And it was like, oh my gosh, so much. I started realizing so many things have been positively impacted from deciding to abstain from drinking alcohol. And then there's all the health stuff too, right? Like inflammation gone out of my body and, migraines being almost completely gone and, so many other endocrine system resetting and, hormones really being back on track and thyroid, regulating and balancing and weight loss. And I mean, there's so many amazing and epic things that have come along from a physical health perspective, when it comes to my physical wealth. My physical wealth has increased dramatically due to making these changes in my life. Something else happened, though, in the last week that I wanted to share. And it was that I had somebody reach out to me that was somebody who actually was one of the people who was hurt in becoming a part of one of the business deals that I was a part of. And this was the one where, it wasn't directly me responsible, but there was the omission piece. I was keeping the secrets, and I knew what was happening and what was going on. And I chose to keep those secrets. And so this woman reached out to me and, she said, hey, I've been following your journey over the last year. And I just want to say, like, you look so happy and I'm so happy for you. And I can just feel this huge shift in you. And I'm so happy about that. And she said, I was really angry with you when all of this went down and I placed blame on you. And one of the things that I've realized over the last several months was that you took the fall and you were thrown under the bus. And you took the brunt of it. And, in hindsight, I can see that it was actually somebody else that was orchestrating it. And that, you likely positioned yourself to take the fall. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting because I have not spoken out about this particular situation. And I have this beautiful, beautiful best friend who I need to be more intentional about connecting with, because I have not been good about that. She's definitely someone that got the short end of the stick in my pull away from all the people that mattered to me. But there's something that she's said to me over and over and over again throughout my life. And it's funny because I'm like, even that she's needed to say this to me over and over again is a good, is something that needs to be reflected on. But she said to me, people of integrity expect to be believed. And when they're not, they let time prove them right. And so something about me is that you are almost never going to see me out defending myself. I have a history in life of people pedestaling me and then vilifying me. And it is something I've experienced my whole entire life. I am a 5-1 projector in human design. And, that 5 line, it carries a lot of projection energy with it. And so, that certainly may be a contributing factor. It's just an energy that I've carried with me my whole life. And so as a result, I get people who are like, you're so amazing. You're so amazing. You're so amazing. They pedestal me. They pedestal me. They pedestal me. Then they realize that I'm just a human being and I make a mistake, or I, show one of my flaws, or I show up imperfectly, and then I get vilified. And because that has been my life experience, I found really early on that there wasn't much sense in me trying to defend myself against every criticism or every person that decided that they wanted to vilify me. And what I know about myself is that I actually would onboard it, and I would onboard that criticism, or I would onboard that vilification, and I would act like it didn't bother me, and I wouldn't address it, and I wouldn't defend myself, but I would carry it with me. And I thought I wasn't carrying it with me. But I think that that is part of like one of the flaws in new age spirituality is this feeling that we have to be responsible for everything and that we have to carry everything alone. And I realized how much of that I was doing and how much of that was actually leading to the deconstruction of my physical health, was the carrying of all of that. And I've realized over the last, year, and this deep dive that I've been taking with God, is that my discernment is so incredibly important. Yes, it is important when it comes to responding to criticism, but the reality is that I don't have to carry that, right? I get to surrender that over to God, and I can let God defend me. And if I am showing up as a person of integrity, and to me, integrity sometimes looks like, in review of what I did in the past that wasn't good, it's taking personal responsibility and accountability for that, and then changing myself and changing my actions and becoming the person that I actually want to be. Doesn't mean that I publicly have to come out and tell everybody what happened and defend myself and talk about how I'm taking self accountability and all of that. Like that's between me and God. And if I do choose to share with someone, maybe someone who was involved in it, or if I do choose to share publicly, then that's up to me, but that's not something that's required. I can let God defend and contend on my behalf. And it was something actually I was reading today. I'm doing the Draw the Circle 40-day prayer challenge with Mark Batterson. And it was something that I was reading today about allowing God to contend for us. And I was like, oh, this is so powerful. And this is something that I really learned. And this conversation, this message from this woman, it was a real illustration of this. So, I could have come out and defended myself when all of this stuff fell apart and this deconstruction happened. But I remembered the thing that Kim had told me. And I was like, people of integrity expect to be believed. And when they're not, they let time prove them right. And so then I began my journey of, how do I come back into full integrity? And how do I now begin to show up as the person that I know that I can be, that I know that I desire to be, and I know God made me to be? And then I let God defend and contend on my behalf, because God saw it all go down, right? God knows the truth of everything that happened. And I did take the fall, and I did agree to take the fall. And in fact, it was probably my idea to take the fall because of the scenario and situation that was happening. But to have somebody witness it and to come and say it to me, and, for her to say, I really see that you have changed and I'm incredibly happy for you. It really struck me, and it really stuck with me. So if you're listening to this podcast episode, you know who you are. And thank you so much for that message, because it was real confirmation that I am doing the right thing and I am on the right path, and that, the surrender to God's will and to walking the path that God sets forward for me, it is the right thing to be doing. And, time reveals all things. And all I need to do is just pray for those that, I feel contributed to my deconstruction, or that I feel have harmed me in the past. But ultimately, I'm not placing blame or pointing fingers at anyone, because I put myself in situations that brought me to the places that I went to. And the only one responsible for that is me. And that was another part of the self-accountability and responsibility in the months that followed the deconstruction. And I know I can't go back and change anything that happened in the past. I can only show up as the best version of me moving forward. And the best version of me is the version that wakes up every single day and prays, and goes to bed every single night and prays, and spends time during the day in prayer, and does life as a co-creation with God, and has, really answered this calling home to God, and is spending, every day of my life now finding faith. And yeah, so I'm excited to be here and to be sharing this journey with you. And if you're going through something similar where, you're having a deconstruction, or you're in the middle of a reconstruction, or you're feeling a call home to God, or you're trying to find faith again, just know, like, you're not alone. And I think for me, like, I felt so alone when I was going through it, and I felt so alone so many times over the last year. But life is a crazy, crazy journey, and it's a crazy, crazy ride. And I think, like I said in the last simulation, or in the last episode, if this whole thing is a simulation, like, how do you want to be living inside the simulation? Do you want to be happy, or do you want to be chasing after something? What is financial freedom? What is that truly? I believe it's a setup. I believe that even the frequency and energy and vibration of that word is a setup. Like, financial freedom, it's, I'm not down with it anymore. And that's not what I want to teach. And that's not how I want to help people show up in their lives. And that's not how I want to be of service any longer. And right now, me being of service is just sharing my journey. And so if these podcasts feel a bit like journal entries to you, it's probably because they are, but that's kind of what I've always used this show as anyway. But ultimately, I share because I know that there are so many of you out there that are going through something similar. I know because the sheer amount of people who have reached out to me in the last 2 weeks since I started publishing these episodes, I have had more engagement and interaction from people the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 5 years of this podcast. So I know that some of you are really benefiting from this, and you feel seen. And, please keep sending the messages. You can always email me at podcast@theleahsteele.com, or you can just send me a direct message on social media. I am happy to share any part of my journey, or to listen to any part of yours, to give advice, to just listen, to share any of the resources that I'm currently using in my journey. And, I know that we are at a crossroads. Humanity's at a crossroads, and we have fallen so far away from God and from who our morals and our values and who we are as a race and as a species. And I know that we can do better. And so I'm going to keep sharing, and I'm going to keep showing up here. And I'm going to keep doing my personal work, and I'm going to keep praying, and I'm praying for all of you. And I love you all so much. And I appreciate the support and the listening to the podcast. And, like I said, I do welcome the feedback. So that is it for today. And I will be sharing more about New Age spirituality and manifestation and money work and all of that as I wrap my arms and my mind and my heart and my soul and my spirit around it. And I get the direction from God on how to move forward in sharing all of that. So have a beautiful and blessed rest of your day, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world as you are listening to this podcast. And I will see you on the next one.